Hi, I'm Brett Blumenthal, and I'm the artist behind Tiny Toes Design, and you are watching my YouTube channel, Brett Blumenthal Studio. Today I'm going to talk to you about paint, watercolor paint specifically. There are a few things that when you're making purchases of your paint that is good to know. If you'd like some more information about watercolor supplies, feel free to download my comprehensive free watercolor supply guide, which gives you everything you need to know about paint, brushes, and more. So let's start looking at paints and how they come. You can buy them either in pans or in tubes. Pans are kind of like what you might expect in art class in elementary school. All you have to do is wet your brush, dip it into the pan, wet it a little bit, and then you can paint. Tube paints, on the other hand, come in a tube, and you squeeze a little bit out into your palette as you need it. When purchasing your watercolor paints, you're going to look for 5 different qualities that will help make your purchasing decision better. The first thing you want to look at is lightfastness. The lightfastness distinction tells you how long your paintings will last if exposed to elements and light. The higher the rating, the longer your paintings will last. Different manufacturers have different ways of distinguishing lightfastness, but essentially you're looking for those paints that have the highest ratings. If you look at this Van Gogh tube of paint, you'll see that it's given 3 pluses. That is because Van Gogh's paints are rated the highest in lightfastness. If you look at this tube of Daniel Smith, you'll see that the lightfastness rating is 3. This too has the highest level of lightfastness that a paint can have. The second factor to look for is pigmentation. Typically, watercolor paints come with 1 or 2 different pigments. You can see in this example of Van Gogh's Indigo that it has a distinction of PB15, PBK6. While this Daniel Smith Pyrrole Scarlet is PR255. Please note that watercolor names can vary from manufacturer to manufacturer, so looking at this pigmentation will really give you an understanding as to the color that you can expect. The third thing to look for is graininess. It is best to choose paints with very fine grains. Otherwise, you run the risk of an uneven distribution of particles, and you can get a very granular look to your painting. Some artists might like that effect, but most tend to like the more smooth, less grainy look. Although not all manufacturers provide this information, if they do, they're going to have the letter G with either a Y or an N afterwards that tells you yes, it's grainy, or no, it's not. The fourth thing that you're going to want to look for is the amount of transparency in your watercolors. The more transparent, the easier it will be to glaze or layer your watercolors, and the more you're going to get that nice, airy, translucent look. To test for transparency, all you have to do is take a permanent black marker and draw a line across your watercolor paper. Then paint swatches of different colors across the black marker line. Those that show the black marker through it are more transparent than those that cover it. Finally, the last thing you want to look for is how much your watercolor paint stains the paper. The more that it stains the paper, the easier it is to layer or glaze with watercolors. However, this will make it more difficult to make any changes or lift up the paint if you have any corrections you want to make. To test how much your watercolor paint will stain your paper versus lift up, you're going to want to paint a swatch of paint and then let it dry completely. And then once fully dry, you're going to take a wet paper towel or a wet sponge or even a wet brush and see if you can lift the paint up. If you can't lift up much paint during this exercise, then that means the paint is very staining. However, if you can lift up a good amount of paint, then that means it is less staining. So those are the 5 qualities that you're going to look for in your paints. Let's go over them again. Lightfastness, pigmentation, graininess, translucency or transparency, and finally, staining. Now, I wanted to go back to pans versus tubes. It's really a matter of personal preference. but I'm going to give you my reasons as to why I like the tubes better. For starters, you have more control over your water to paint ratio. I know a lot of watercolorists, especially when they're beginning, tend to struggle with this ratio, and so having a tube of paint makes it a little bit easier. Also, it's a lot easier to mix your colors because you're getting the pure color out of the tube and putting it into your palette, and then you can mix them together. While trying to get them out of the pan, especially enough paint out of the pan, is a lot more difficult. Also, I find that tubes tend to be more economical and less wasteful. You get a lot more paint out of a tube than you do out of a pan, and because your pans tend to bleed into each other, they can create muddied colors, which means that they're not going to be as useful as a pure color out of the tube. Thank you for watching this video. I hope it was helpful when it comes to understanding watercolor paints better. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment below with what your experience has been with watercolor paints. And if you'd like to get a more comprehensive guide on all of the watercolor supplies that you need, please download my free watercolor supply guide.